priced in a lot, and I think that that's a reflection of the estimates that we've had so far and some of the communications we've had so far. So, you know, in uncertain world,
I was with my grandparents for a little bit, so I'm a little later than I should be.
This is all ground we've talked about this a few times. But TK, can you imagine if it's Federal Reserve in the next 90 minutes or so communicates in the way that Christine Lagarde has over the European Central Bank? It says things like, we're going to take this meeting by meeting. We'll offer you guidance whatsoever.
God damn it, YouTube.
About the next move. We won't commit to a thing. You can have 25 basis points today, and we'll see you in a couple of months. This market would crater.
You're dead on. And the smartest thing I saw today was a single sentence from a guy named Alarian off some tweet. He had some free time.
I have my. Oh, you can't see it.
Patriots.
I got a Biden head.
This isn't about us. He didn't mention the ECB, but he did mention the Bank of England and the Bank of Japan watching. This is a global meeting, John.
Mohammed?
But you can't see it. I thought you'd be able to see it. You can see the very bottom of it. I had to figure out a place to put it.
So I suspect, I know the Fed will cut today. The question about how much. I suspect the Bank of England will not cut tomorrow, and I suspect the Bank of Japan will hike.
Didn't the Bank of England already cut rates a little bit ago?
About a global cycle, there is dispersion within this global cycle.
Back-to-back decisions into Thursday. The Bank of England on Friday. The BOJ ahead of the Fed. 7 minutes away. Joining us now is Aditya Bave of Bank of America Global Research. Aditya, let's just start with the base case. What you're looking for from this Federal Reserve, the decisions, and the kind of changes to the forecast you're looking for in about 7 minutes' time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So we're in the 25 camp. I think Mohammed made the case a lot more articulately, honestly, than I can.
I'm in the 50 camp, personally.
Before the
and if I was in charge,
the jobs report, the Fed
I would cut it by 75.
We want to go 50. They could have laid that case out.
I would cut it. I think Krugman said he wants to see it cut by 150. That'd be interesting. That'd be fucking based if Jerome Powell came up and said, "I read Krugman's editorial in the New York Times. I'm cutting interest rates by 200 basis points." Technically, I guess it's just not his. It's not his decision, right? It's the committee's. I don't think he can make it unilaterally.
They give the impression that those voices are now more powerful than Fed speakers.
That said, Aditya, some people argue that the Fed is far above neutral in terms of their benchmark rate, and that if they're going to cut and they're trying to get back down to neutral, given where inflation is,
or sixth form in 9 months,
the slower they go, the more restrictive in a way.
You have exams in 8 months applying to college or sixth forms in 9 months.
Hold water to you.
What do you mean or sixth form?
It's a reasonable argument, and they could have made that case for 50, right? So here's what they could have said. They could have said, this is very similar to the mid-cycle adjustments of 1995 and 2019.
Here, let me show you
guys. It's just that we're significantly above neutral, as you said, Lisa, and so we need to come down in iterations of 50 rather than 25. If they had communicated that clearly, they would have potentially been fine. Right now, the risk is that the market keeps pushing you to do more. So
beautiful Biden, today, dark Brandon.
Everything could still work out fine, but the risk is the next time you get some weak data, and that's inevitable when the economy is slowing down a bit, the market's going to push for 75.
Aditya, the economist Brian Moynihan 6
I don't have a
months
good place
ago
to put it.
lectured Jay Powell that just possibly the consumer may slow down.
Maybe
We're
put
waiting.
it
I'm talking
above that,
4.8,
like back there. Maybe you'd be able to see it more.
Is the consumer slowing
Sixth
down?
form is how you do levels to pick up.
The consumer has been remarkably resilient. We had a bit of a softer batch at the start of the year, which is probably what
finally
was being referred to. But if you look at the
after
last
he dropped out,
months, even to our surprise, there's been a rebound. Retail sales over the last 4 months have just been very, very solid, right? So
real consumption has been pretty much on track.
What you would see in a labor-driven slowdown is that eventually the consumer collapses under the weight of labor income loss, and that's not happened so far.
Aditya, I understand the arithmetic that leads to the hypothesis that we are very restrictive.
Another 2 years sitting in the same classroom. Awesome. That's so fun.
I don't know a single indicator of financial conditions that doesn't flash very loose financial conditions.
I could find
so can you reconcile the two for us?
Yeah, I think neutral would be higher. Right, so what do we know about neutral, really, to be honest? I think we can say with some conviction that it's somewhere between 2.5% and 4%. Beyond that, I don't think we can say a lot with conviction. So then it's going to come down to, we'll learn where neutral is as the Fed cuts based on what the economy does. And if they are able to soft land this economy, if they're sitting at 4% rates 3 months, 6 months down the line, depending on how far they cut, then I think the assessment has to be that maybe R-star has gone up. So even if the dots for R-star don't go up this time around, they might go up in the future. On the flip side, if we do go into a recession, which is not our base case, then you would say, okay, we were actually a lot more restrictive.
They're popping in to wish you a good stream. Thank you, Bert Stein.
Aditya, appreciate your insight as always. Looking for 25 in 3 minutes' time. Aditya Bave there of Bank of America Global Research. I'm pleased we got to this discussion. Equity markets close to all-time highs. Bond yields are low. Spreads are tight. We've had a round trip through the whole of August. And think about the demand we're already seeing for debt worldwide, across Europe, here in the United States as well, both sovereign and corporate. And look at what's happening with mortgage applications in America. Before we've even seen the first interest rate cut, we're already starting to unlock a lot of activity. Big move higher, TK. Big move higher this morning.
Which to me just highlights the reason why people treat the markets as though they're an adolescent looking for more, and you give them a little bit, and then they're looking for even more. This idea that if the Fed says, fine, you guys can have your 50 basis points, then they're going to keep going with that, and that's going to create much easier financial conditions.
Quickly, Peter Orszag at Brookings with terrific 3 essays, Mohammed, on what the pandemic did to our microeconomics of our system. Are we still in the pandemic?
No, I think we've mostly exited, with the labor market being the last sector to adjust.
Do you think we're in bubble territory here? What do you think about some of these market moves? The fact we haven't even seen a rate cut yet, and we're already at these kind of levels.
I think we've gotten carried away on the fixed income side, both on
bonds more than stocks.
I went to Panera Bread, by the way. I got my brownie.
I think stocks, you can make stories for secular changes, for real transformational changes. I think in the bond market, you can't make that argument. If you make it, then you should go the other way, because we have fiscal deficits of 6 to 8%. We have high debt levels. The secular argument isn't in your favor in the bond market.
2 issues in the last few weeks. We've talked about them. We had debt out of Italy, record order book. The week before, we had debt out of the UK.
Do you think they make these
for some of the busiest days we've ever seen in the high-grade corporate market in America? Tons of demand to back it up.
And when you ask people why, they say there's cash out there and people want to lock in yields before some of those rates go down. I love this story idea that basically you can come up with a story for stocks, but the story for bonds doesn't work logically with where it is right now. And that, I think, is the key. If you're storytelling, stocks actually make more sense right now than the story that is the bond market.
What did you say this morning? This is a market where logic comes to die.
Yes.
Isn't that what you said?
Yes,
why did you attack Trump?
My line of the month. My line of the month. This is
what do you mean by that? Are you alleging that I'm the shooter again?
Away. Going into it, your scores look like this in the equity market, firmer by about 1/10% on the S&P 500.
All right, we're getting there.
In the bond market, 2-year, 10-year, 30-year, your scores as follows. Your 2-year yield in America has been moving lower over the last month. Your yield 3.65. Your Fed decision with Mike McKee.
It's 50, and the promise of another 50.
Fuck yeah, let's go. Let's go. I knew it was going to be 50.
In 2025, which
God, I should have bet on it.
Benchmark rate at 3.4%. It's projected to fall another 50 basis points in 2026.
Heard someone's going to kaboom.
Which would put the rate at 2.9%, which is now the Fed's median forecast for the neutral rate. That is up 1/10 from.
Wait, what did he forecast a neutral rate?
In 2026, which would put the rate at 2.9%, which is now the Fed's median forecast for the neutral rate. That is up 1/10 from June. The consensus is GDP will rise 2% this year, down 1/10 from the June forecast. Growth will be the same in 25 and 26. Unemployment will hit 4.4% this year. That's an increase from the June figure. It will fall to 4.3% in 2026. PCE inflation of 2.3% this year falls to 2.1% next year.
Damn, I'm right about unemployment before.
In 2026. Though inflation remains, quote, somewhat elevated, the statement says they cut because they now have greater confidence inflation is moving sustainably toward their 2% target.
Not even elevated. Not even elevated. It's just owner's equivalent rent. Thank you, Revenge to the Pager. Oh, topical name.
Point reduction. The statement says the committee is strongly committed to supporting maximum employment. And remember, in Jackson Hole, Chairman Powell said any deterioration in the labor market would be unwelcome. There was one dissent from Governor Mickey Bowman. It's the first dissent by a Fed governor since 2005. It is the first dissent by any member of the committee since 2022. The statement adjusted to say the committee will, as always, carefully assess incoming data, quote, in considering additional adjustments. There's no change.
The brain rot is crazy. No one's gonna watch. No, new day, new account. No one's gonna watch.
Back to you. Here's the price action in response.
Anything about fucking interest rates unless they have Minecraft parkour. Okay. No one cares about this.
500. The overwhelming
without the Minecraft parkour.
The small caps now up by 1.7% in the bond market.
Listen, I get it.
We've come a long
I get it.
And we've priced in a lot to this yield curve. The 2-year.
It's the Federal Reserve Federal. It's complicated. It's like sort of part of the government, but it sort of isn't.
And in the FX market,
the head of the Federal Reserve, the chairman, is appointed by the president. But some of the people on the committee are like appointed by private banks, so it's complicated. Do you invest? I don't really invest. My portfolio is performing well.
You're seeing a bid into gold.
Well, that's good. It's probably gonna. Yep. There's the Nasdaq. I was gonna say probably gonna see a big jump right now.
Just on the margins, not significantly.
Damn.
Up on this idea that they're going to go bigger and potentially even more down the line.
So the median dot can mask some disagreement beneath the surface. So let's talk about the range and not just the median at the FOMC. The median dot for 2025 in the projection materials that were just published is 3.4%. The range for 2025 is anywhere.
Why did you attack the stock market? What do you mean?
2.9 to 4.1. That's quite a range on this FOMC. And I think for the first time in a long time, we have some dissent playing out publicly as well.
Jerome Powell did it. He had the courage. He had the courage the way Mike Pence didn't.
This was not a unanimous decision.
And it really highlights why this actually became such a knife's edge kind of decision. Just to add to that, 10 officials penciled in 100 basis points or more of cuts for this year. 9 officials penciled in 75 basis points or less for this year. It actually
Thanks for the sub, Blake Meyer. Welcome to the stream.
Especially given the policy uncertainty next year.
Hell yeah.
We're waiting for the next Actors and News Conference in 26 minutes time.
I think it's a surprise. Within the zeitgeist, this is to the edge of surprise. I think Powell maybe alluded to this with his enthusiasms at Jackson Hole. You touched on something Jason Furman touched on this morning, which is don't forget the
I was actually close to betting on a 50-point cut.
The great unknown here, a dollar weakness that anybody without gray hair doesn't know.
That we may not know. I think we've seen it before.
This is a funny video.
I remember periods of dollar weakness. But it is dollar weakness. This is not just a 50 basis point cut. This is a dovish 50 basis point cut.
Well said, yeah.
Right? I mean, now, I agree with you, John, that the dovish part comes from the median dots. But if you look at the range, it doesn't look at dovish. But that's not what the market is going to hear. The market is going to look at the median dot and will interpret this as a dovish 50 basis points cut. And the first reaction was actually a steepening of both 2s10s and 2s30s, which tells you something about what people are worried about.
To some extent, this median dot validates market pricing coming into this decision. Is that sufficient?
What's
up? An equity market reaction right now by 0.5%.
Rate cuts.
Yeah, 50, baby. Let's go. Let's go.
Pretty big.
Yeah. Did you see? I wish Krugman wrote like an editorial today. He was like, yeah, he said he wanted like a 150 basis point cut, which obviously is never going to happen. But
well, yeah, well,
I think it would have been funny.
That's good. At least that's good. I mean, obviously that's the Fed intervening to help Kamala. Obviously.
I know. Yeah, that's what Ben Shapiro said, bro.
Really? No way. No way. Oh, shameless. My God.
Yeah, when it was a while ago where Powell did like some press conference and he just said like, oh, we're probably going to cut rates in September. And Ben Shapiro was like, the Fed cutting rates right before the election. Who could have seen that coming? Like,
yeah, that's terrible. That's so cringe. Did you watch Rob North and talk to Pisco?
On the hippy dippy thing that I told you about?
Yeah. Wait, no, the Destiny reviewed like the debate. I don't know if you were on the panel. There was Rob Noor talking to Pisco. There were other people there. Andrew Wilson, IRI.
Yeah, that was the hippy dippy panel, right? I watched the panel. Yeah. I don't think I watched Destiny react to it, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was. My God, I'm like 40 minutes in. It's 3 hours. The Destiny's review. I want to kill myself. It's like so painful. listening to Andrew Wilson say, "Oh, artificially increasing the supply that increases inflation." That's
Oh,
like
yeah, I
you
know. It's
have
wild.
to. My God, my God. But God, kill me. Yeah, well, I don't know. Cons are insane, but at least the Fed cut rates. Now it's good. Now it's looking good. Feeling better about the U.S. economy now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. You know what I'm scared of is that like I don't know some unrelated recession will happen when Kamala is in office, and then it's like we get like
Yeah,
8 years of
yeah, people will
like
automatically blame her. People will blame her for everything. So.
100%, 100%. Yeah, terrible, terrible. But yeah, I don't
Oh
know
my
how
God,
people
they
react.
fucking Discord. Did you hear about this? Discord decreased the file size that you can
Yes,
upload.
yes. That's why I use Notion. That's why I use Notion,
God.
dude. When I use Notion as kind of like my second hard drive, or my second Google Drive. But because I mean, I think if they don't limit like how many files you can upload or like the size, I think they limit like the size of individual files. But like you can, I don't know, split the files or whatever and like store them. I don't know. I have my own like legal Notion book library. So yeah, I don't know. It's epic. It's epic. Yeah. I'm not downloading from allegedly libgen and Z library every time again and again. No, I'm not doing that. You know what book I wanna read? The well, no, I don't know. I don't want to reveal it.
You know, I have access to like I had to buy some subscription to a textbook site for college classes, so I have access to like a lot of textbooks.
Oh, you bought the access?
Need.
Well, can you not just like access it through Z library?
Well, I what was annoying was that some classes told you which textbook you needed, and then others were just like, oh, just buy the unlimited subscription, and then you'll have access to all of the textbooks there. And like, I mean, it's not my money.
Okay.
My parents are paying for my textbook, so I was just like,
Sure, but you can get it for free either way.
Yeah, I know.
You can tell your parents, hey, Pat, like Venmo me the money. I'll find the books.
Yeah, I'll buy it.
And then you buy it from Z Library, and then you get free money and free books.
Damn, I should have.
I'm immoral.
Yeah, but,
no, I am moral. I'm increasing utility.
What's funny is the layout of it is so bad that genuinely I am just gonna pirate them anyway, because like then I can at least like I can have my own ebook font or whatever, use my own ebook software and not have to deal with their dumbass shit. My
Notion is under my like university email, right? So I have unlimited. I can also upload like unlimited file sizes. So I just have like I have my Notion library and I just spam a lot of PDFs there and I organize it on topics and author. Oh my god, author, and yeah, no, I have like you can do a Notion database and you can like tag book, like tag whatever. It's based. Notion's based. You know that.
Yeah.
But yeah. I
don't know. Did you see my Biden head that I got?
No, what? Whoa, yo, let's go. I mean, outdated. Is there a Kamala version? Dark Kamala? Oh my god, that's racist probably. No.
Dark Kamala.
Dark Kamabla. That's what Trump's calling her. I don't know. I don't get the reference. Kamabla? What's is it like Obama?
Know. Yeah, he's just dumb.
It's
supposed to be Obama. Like
yeah, okay, yeah. I mean Obama, a known unpopular president. Yeah.
I know, it's so dumb. I've seen memes that are like, don't elect Obama for our fourth term. Because Biden,
with the
Biden was just Obama
heads,
too. So.
With the heads thing?
Yeah, it's
like actual, yeah, terrible. They're all crazy. I don't know. Wait, Vance said something insane. I'm trying to remember what he said. He said a bunch of insane shit. But he said like let's not call people fascists and whatnot. And then like 2 days before, Trump said like Kala is a Marxist, fascist, communist. It's like okay, it's like no, it's so hypocritical. It's shameless. I hate Republicans. I fucking dude, I'm fucking hypnotized by the Subway Surfers. My God.
I know, yeah. Well, no one's gonna watch anything about interest rates unless they have fucking.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. No, I should do that. I should study like that. That's space. What did you look up on YouTube to get that? Did you look up like infinite TikTok, Subway Surfer, or whatever?
Yeah, I looked up a video of Minecraft parkour and I looked up a video of Subway Surfers and I made it alternate every 5 minutes. I had to edit it.
Epic.
But yeah. It's fire.
Yeah, that's epic. Yeah. Oh, that's base. Well, We'll see how the market reacts to the Fed cut. But yeah, good news. God, I hate conservatives. Saying it's political is so insane. My God, I think Ben Shapiro is totally like insane. He knows he's lying. It's like he's like a Tucker Carlson, but like I don't know.
Yeah, it's literally. Oh, I should find the meme of like the cycle of like he has to defend Trump, and he has to say increasingly more and more retarded things to defend Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes his audience more retarded, which means he has to do.
Yeah, he hates when the central bank is not independent and does political action. That's why Trump campaigns on reducing interest rates.
Dude, I think
like,
I am gonna nail down hard on that, and like any future debate I want to, I do. I'm just gonna be like, okay, first, like we can talk about like any shit that Joe Biden did or whatever. First, I just want to like, can we agree like this is a super bad idea? Yeah,
exactly.
And it's like even if you trust Trump to make decisions about the interest rate, even if Daddy Trump is the all-knowing God and he would be the ultimate chairman of the Federal Reserve, he only gets one more term, and then fucking a Democrat's going to be elected.
No, you know how you need to do that? You need to be like the way you trick them. You have to use debate tactics to win against Republicans because like they're so insane and they'll interrupt you and they'll be schizophrenic. What you need to do is be like, look, I don't like everything Biden did. I didn't like when Biden did X, Y, and Z. And because they're politically illiterate, you can say in X, Y, and Z something that Trump either did or plans to do. And then they'll be like, okay, yeah, I get that. And then be like, and then like you keep going. You don't twist the knife the moment you can. But once it's right, once the moment's right, and you had like 5 fake things that they already said were bad, and that these are things Trump plans to do. Not like something obvious like tariffs, because every Republican knows like tariffs is a Trump thing. But like some there are 1,000,001 retarded things Trump did. But yeah, that when the moment's right, you'll be like, actually, all of it was Trump, and you're retarded, and you should look in the mirror and cry. Yeah. I hate Republicans. No place for good faith with them. No place. But yeah, I hate them more than socialists. I said it. Not more than communists.
Well, yeah,
one
type of socialist, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's the difference, right? It's all fascism, Marxism, communism, socialism.
Yeah. Just like Kamala.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I don't know what's happening now in U.S. politics that I'm missing.
Not much. It's all fucking
election
stuff.
It's
the immigrants are eating cats and dogs. It's
oh my god! Did you see the creating story thing?
Yep. I thought that was AI generated when I first saw it. I was like, this is AI.
And the cope is like, oh no, we create a story that is we like make you talk about it. It's like we create a story in the headlines. We create the headlines are created. It's like you cannot come back from that. But of course they'll come back from that because their base doesn't care. It's so insane. I'm losing my mind. Yeah. Well, at least Kamala is looking great in the polls. But hey, the polls don't mean anything. The polls don't mean anything.
Oh man.
The polls are just snapshots. What matters? You know what matters? Are the keys. The keys.
Oh, the keys to the White House, of course.
I like Lichtman, but he's like look, the keys obviously are predictive, but she's leaning on them way too hard. That's what I don't like about him.
Yeah.
It's like obviously, the economy impacts the election. No one's denying that. And if it's a key, then that gives you predictive power. But like basing your entire thing on it and reducing everything to that, so when I say he's reducing, he's not saying it's causally reduced. He's just saying I can predict just based on that. It's like, I doubt it. N equals 10 is not enough. That's what I'm saying. Well, whatever. But yeah. Damn. I'm hypnotized by the Minecraft thing. My God.
Yeah, it's
I
beautiful.
should do that. It is. Are you? Can you see it or?
I mean, I can see it on my second monitor.
Oh yeah, but it's not. You cannot see it on
my
your.
OBS. But no, this is capturing my entire screen. So.
Oh, I see. I get it. Okay. Interesting. Let me like your live. Give me a second.
Hell yeah.
That's right. I always do when I pop in. I do. But yeah. Well. How are the North Carolina polls looking?
They're basically tied.
Yikes.
Yeah. Well, what's good is that I've told you a little bit about this before. I think is that the Republican candidate for governor here is literally so fucking schizo insane that it's motivating a lot of people to come out and vote against him, and a lot of people are going to vote up the ballot for Kamala. He's literally, there was a new video that came out of him like saying that like young girls have to get this region under control while like hovering over his crotch.
What?
He's literally, because he's like a preacher, and he was like, these liberals giving the teens birth control. What young women have to learn to do is to get this region under control.
Oh my God, Dems need to campaign on that if they're competent. If they're competent, they need to. It's like, the Republicans want to control your, vajayjays. Yeah. It's like insane. It's insane. But I mean, terrible. That's gross. That's like reminding. Oh my God, yikes!
I know, it is just gross.
It's like worse than grabbing by the pussy, in my opinion. Maybe not. It's maybe.
And he's like, well, he has like so many like videos where he's been on like podcasts, and he's like, no exceptions for abortion. Abortion, it's never about the exceptions. It's always about women not being able to keep their skirts down. He has like he's like a preacher, so he's like really like anti-gay shit.
When you talk to lefties, they'll always say like, oh, it's not about the fetus, it's about controlling women. And to some extent that's true, to some extent that's false. Like some people actually think that's murder. Some people actually just want to control women, and he's like explicit. It's like, I just want to control women.
He doesn't want,
they're like, I think the government should like, influence people's decisions, like private decisions. Like, no, get the fuck out of my life.
Yeah, he's wild. He calls gay people maggots. He's literally, he's schizo.
No way.
There's like multiple like controversies he's been in where like he hasn't paid his taxes, and like his wife stole money from the government by running a charity and like paying herself like laundered money through the charity. He had like a daycare.
Is he old or what?
He's like 60 something.
Okay, he could be an ex-Trump.
Oh, he's 56.
Okay, he could be an ex-Trump.
Yeah, but like he hasn't paid his taxes.
Never mind, he will never be an ex-Trump. He's black. He will never.
His daycare, I haven't read into the daycare thing, but like he ran like a daycare that was like abusing children or something.
That's
like
based.
The inspections. He like failed inspections, so like he's literally the worst possible candidate they could have chosen. But he's
my God, yeah. Well, you didn't join Hezbollah, right?
No. So I didn't get mine. I didn't get the walkie-talkies.
You didn't get neutered. That's right. But no, I mean, look, pulling this operation off, it has to take a lot of balls. Okay.
Yeah.
Get it?
Oh wow.
Yeah. Get it? Yeah. I stole it from Avi Bitterman, the best Twitter account. But that's about it. You can keep watching. What is this? What channel? What news channel is this?
This is Bloomberg, but in like 10 minutes the actual.
I'm waiting for the Krugman verdict. I cannot have an opinion unless Krugman tells me what to think.
Here's like. I sent the link to a thing in general. He says, I would like to see the Fed cut by 200, 250, 300 basis points quite quickly right away with rhetoric that makes it clear this is just the beginning.
I don't know about that. That's a little unhinged. I think that's unhinged. I don't know how that'd be good.
It would have been so base.
I'm fine with that over like 5 months, but not over like quickly. Not too much, I think.
That's what I would have done if I was Shay Powell. I would have woken up. I would have woke up. I would have read what Krugman said, and I would have just done it. I would have just followed.
My God, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's nice. Well, yeah. Luckily, no one's. My God, I had so much material on greedflation, and no one's talking about it anymore. It's dead. Wait, my dad's calling me. Well, I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.
All right, bye. Thanks. I might need some of that stuff in greedflation. I have I mean, like you said, not many people are talking about it anymore, but well, because inflation's down, so there's no reason to talk about it anymore. I read, I think, like 3 things in inflation, and I have another link that I haven't read yet.
Project confidence in the economy, positivity in the economy, so they avoid a negative confidence signal.
What's the S&P 500 at?
I think that they want to send a signal that this is not the new norm, that they're going to be ratcheting
what
down
was the all-time high?
increments. And as I look at that dot plot and this
was this the all-time high?
This year, it does seem that there's a pretty strong
5,600
kind of consensus around going 25 basis points from here. I think 18 out of 19 dots showed
so we're like
only an
close to
expectation
all-time
of 2
highs.
more 25 basis point rate cuts or less. And so I think Powell can paint this as a one-off. It was meant to right-size monetary policy to a lower inflation environment, ensure that the real rate doesn't rise too much, and to really show that kind of actions speak louder than words in providing confidence on the soft landing.
Matt Lozzetti, the 10-year real yield just printed below 1.50. To me, that's a huge signal coming out of the pandemic. What does a diminished real yield do for American business, American finance?
Only with
Look, I think we should expect that the goal of this is to keep
I was trying to do a joke with like
to ensure that financial conditions don't
with like bonds
and put a soft landing in jeopardy. That is ultimately the
like
legacy
bonding,
of Chair Powell.
but I can't make one.
Today.
I don't know.
I think that's a good outcome for the economy. Hopefully he can message it in that way, which is they have a positive outlook. This is not the starting of a 50 basis point cutting cycle. And I think if you get that, soft landing prospects improve, financial conditions ease, and we have a very good outcome for the economy.
Matt, one of the stickiest areas of inflation has been the housing market. And what we've seen there has been recently an uptick in mortgage applications, as well as just in general, some of the home lender stocks.
Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Housing is not going to be solved with monetary policy. Why the fuck is the Fed looking at housing prices? Who cares? Don't care. Don't care. I guess mortgage rates matter.
Yeah, we got mortgage purchase applications this morning, and they did show a tick
cares? Don't care. Don't
driven
care.
By refinancing activity.
Solve it with YIMBYism. You don't solve it with fucking interest rates.
A little bit the move in the mortgage rates so far. My own view is I think that's driven by when you look at the University of Michigan or Conference Board, so many consumers expect rates to come down over the next year, and so that has to happen as rate cuts happen.
What? A Republican used the rate cuts to criticize Democratic policies. Unfortunately, the damage to the Democrats' unbridled spending and Biden-Harris's failed economic agenda has been done, and it was worse than was imagined. What's missing from the strategy to bring down inflation and strengthen our economy is less spending, less taxes, less regulations, and less
look
debt.
at consumer spending on a 3-month
Why?
annualized rate,
Why?
it's the
What a
highest that
dumb.
we've had since 2011.
Why?
We got a robust retail sales report this week. So, I think Chair Powell should present a picture where the underlying economy and fundamentals are resilient and strong here, but they were taking decisive action today to ensure that those outcomes continue.
Hey, Matt, final round before you go. Question for the chairman in this news conference. What's your number one question?
I think it's all about reaction function. So the fact that they went by 50 basis points today before seeing very weak outcomes for the economy will naturally raise questions in the market about what if you get a weaker jobs report? Do they go by 75 basis points or not? So I think it's all about the reaction function from here. And how does he respond to that? Does he kind of set a high bar either for another 50 basis point or even higher rate cuts?
Matt Lozzetti at Deutsche Bank. Bob Michael at JP Morgan Asset Management still with us. Bob, you love asking this one too, so I'll ask it for you. What's your question for Mike McKee in this news conference a little bit later on this afternoon?
Has the concept of an equilibrium, long-term neutral Fed funds rate expired? Do we need that anymore? Shouldn't they be talking more in terms of a real Fed funds rate, maybe minus 1%
what the
to plus
fuck?
3%? I mean, for goodness sakes, in my career, I've seen the Fed funds rate at 0 and 20%. So trying to target something like that is nonsensical to me.
Hey, Bob, got to catch up as always. Bob Michael at JP Morgan Asset Management. We get 50 from the Federal Reserve. Your news conference is 5 minutes away. The price action looks like this, up 0.5% on the S&P 500. In the last hour, Lisa printing a new all-time high on the S&P.
Which really is in line with what some people were expecting, although disappointment they did not get. If you want to take a look at whether this is a Fed that can outdove market expectations, it seems like they did. And the projections going forward really highlight how this market likes to run ahead of even where Fed pricing is. Just look at this. If you take a look at Fed fund future pricing, we're actually pricing in a 4.1% Fed funds rate to end this year. So we're talking about an additional almost 100 basis points of additional cuts from here, 150 basis points of cuts, which just, again, points to why a dovish 50 basis point cut has made a difference in this market.
Mohammed, you alluded to this. If
that's viewers, I gotta check these viewers
to
out.
go 50 again, is that what's happening?
That is what's happening, and the market loves this. And it's been the repeated conditioning of the market. Give it
Get fucked. Get fucked.
I'm eating a fucking brownie, dude.
Institute of Behavioral Economics and
Damn.
Policy.
Would you behave?
The first, I would behave, and the answer is there's 2 United Kingdoms out there, and there's 2 Americas out there, and he has to address.
Does Israel have Panera Bread?
And the political
Can
debate.
his mind even comprehend?
It's not just about Bob Michael and the
Panera Bread
portfolio on
brownie.
Park Avenue trying to figure out what to do next.
How does he navigate some of those issues, Mohammed? How difficult is it to set policy for 2 very different
Does
experiences in
Panera
this
Bread
economy?
support Israel?
It's very difficult. It's even more difficult when politicians are shouting,
go 75.
Go 75. No, it is. It is.
They
really
should go
difficult. What's not clear
75.
to me is
I don't know
if
if they
he
should
is
go
actually
75.
buying insurance, what is the cost of that insurance? What is the downside of buying insurance? You know, insurance.
I support
is
Israel. That kind of makes sense for Venja to page
What is the
here.
downside of having bought insurance for the economy? And that's something we'll only find out over time.
But what's the cost of buying insurance for the economy, but also for the Fed and for its political independence and its reputation therein? I just wonder if it's more difficult to make the decision now on November 7th, now that you've had this initial 50 basis point rate cut, and you have a market that's now saying, yeah, you could do another one in November.
Yeah, and that was the argument all along. Start in July. Don't get yourself in this situation. But it is what it is, and they're now going to have to navigate this. I think Powell is going to be very clear. He'll say we are not impacted by political issues, just like he will say that he is blessed, to use his word, by lots of opinions from outside. But ultimately, it's what they decide.
Going free pages to humanitarian
after
aid.
this one, in just a moment, 2 minutes away, Chairman Powell will walk into that room and give us a news conference for the next 60 minutes or so. We'll take that in its entirety.
I don't know if we're going to
Bloomberg
watch all
TV
60 minutes.
and on Bloomberg Radio. Lisa, things could be very different on November 7th. We've said that repeatedly. I don't think you can overstate it. Things could be very different. The outlook for 2025 could shape up in a rather different way, dependent on what the complexion of Congress looks like, how divided things are in the nation's capital.
And whether or not we even know at that point, as Anne-Marie likes to say, whether we have a decision. It just will be interesting how much, this is the 3-part act, we get the 3rd part of the act coming up moments away, how he characterizes what this insurance policy is really for. Is this because they are seeing true weakening in a labor market that otherwise is kind of hanging in there? And that, I think, is one of the key questions.
How do you expect him to frame it? Is this a one-off mid-cycle adjustment, a wait and see, we'll regroup in November, or is this the beginning of a one-way trip back towards what they think is neutral?
Could it be both? I mean, right? Is there's basically, everyone have their cake and then eat it too? Because essentially you have inflation coming down and you have an economy that is in a trajectory that typically does lead to further weakening. Is it history that can actually make sense at a time that has defied a lot of historical precedents? It's going to be a really difficult one for him to really
It's going to be difficult because they're coming out of a pandemic and they're making it up every meeting and every day and every speech, John, as they go. They're making this up as they go. Today they catch up, maybe is the right way to put it, but the then what of November and into 2025 is real.
We certainly all agree on that. We've said this a few times. We've all been humbled through this pandemic and coming out the other side. Equities right now going into this one just short of all-time highs on the S&P 500. We are firmer by 0.5% in the bond market. This is the yield reaction. On a 2-year, we're down 4 basis points going into this news conference. Just remember, for 7 consecutive Fed decision days, this 2-year has rallied. This yield has dropped, and that continues at least for now. We're down 4 basis points at the front end of the curve. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, after cutting interest rates by 50 basis points, takes the floor.
Let's go.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Our economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has cooled from its formerly overheated state. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to an estimated 2.2% as of August. We're committed to maintaining our economy's strength by supporting maximum employment and returning inflation to our 2% goal. Today,
it's already at your 2% goal. You don't target 2.00%. You're supposed to target 2%.
By lowering our policy interest rate by a half percentage point. This decision reflects our growing
2%?
confidence
What do you mean?
that with an appropriate recalibration of our policy
Really?
stance,
They're probably using core PCE.
in a context of moderate growth and inflation moving sustainably down to 2%. We also decided to continue to reduce our securities.
Thought we were at 6. We have not been at 6 for a while.
I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP rose at an annual rate of 2.2% in the first half of the year, and available data point to a roughly similar pace of growth this quarter. Growth of consumer spending has remained resilient, and investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. In the housing sector, investment fell back in the second quarter after rising strongly in the first.
Don't care. Don't look at you. Can't do shit about housing, buddy. Get over it.
Resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In our summary of economic projections, committee participants generally expect GDP growth to remain solid, with a median projection of 2% over the next few years. In the labor market, conditions have continued to cool. Payroll job gains averaged 116,000 per month over the past 3 months, a notable step down from the pace seen earlier in the year. The unemployment rate has moved up but remains low at 4.2%. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs to workers gap has narrowed.
We did see real income growth for the first time.
Indicators suggest that conditions in the labor market are now less tight than just before the pandemic in 2019. The labor market is not a source of elevated inflationary pressures. The median projection for the unemployment rate in the SEP is 4.4% at the end of this year, 0.4 higher than projected in June. Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains above our longer-run goal of 2%. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.2% over the 12 months ending in August, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.7%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 2.3% this year and 2.1% next year, somewhat lower than projected in June. Thereafter, the median projection
energy
is
prices
2%.
Depends where you live.
Our monetary policy actions are guided
I think energy prices have probably gone up a little bit, considering
and stable prices
considering
for the
the
American people.
core inflation was higher than the have gone down because the core inflation was higher than the non-core inflation.
Were extremely tight. Our primary focus had been on bringing down inflation, and appropriately so. We are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Our restrictive monetary policy has helped restore the balance between aggregate supply and demand, easing inflationary pressures and ensuring that inflation expectations remain well anchored. Our patient approach over the past year has paid dividends. Inflation is now much closer to our objective, and we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%.
It was transitory.
As inflation has declined and the labor market has cooled, the upside risks to inflation have diminished, and the downside risks to employment have increased. We now see the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals as roughly in balance, and we are attentive to the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. In light of the progress on inflation and the balance of risks, at today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a 0.5 percentage point to 4.75% to 5%. This recalibration of our policy stance will help maintain the strength of the economy and the labor market, and will continue to enable further progress on inflation.
So more people will lose jobs? No, if this rate cut is supposed to make sure more people don't lose jobs.
We are not on any preset course. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting. We know that reducing policy restraint too quickly could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing restraint too slowly could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. In our SEP, FOMC participants wrote down their individual assessments of an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what each participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as expected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 4.4% at the end of this year and 3.4% at the end of 2025. These median projections are lower than in June, consistent with the projections for lower inflation and higher unemployment, as well as the changed balance of risks. These projections, however, are not a committee plan or decision. As the economy evolves, monetary policy will adjust in order to best promote our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains solid and inflation persists, we can dial back policy restraint more slowly. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we are prepared to respond. Policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides.
What is the latest harmonized inflation numbers? I don't actually know.
The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to supporting maximum employment, bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal, and keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand
Wait,
that
this is
our actions
CPI.
affect
What's the harmonized data?
families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Year over year. 1%, 1.3.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for taking our questions. In July, you said you weren't necessarily thinking about a 50. You didn't want to be specific, but you said you weren't thinking about a 50. The inflation data last week came out a little firmer than expected. Retail was strong, third quarter GDP running 3%. So what changed and made the committee go 50, and how do you respond to the concerns that perhaps it shows the Fed is more concerned about the labor market? And I guess, should we expect more 50s in the months ahead? And based on what should we make that call? Thank you.
So, okay, a lot of questions in there. Let me jump in. Since the last meeting, we have had a lot of data come in. We've had the two employment reports, July and August. We've also had two inflation reports, including one that came in during blackout. We had the QCEW report, which suggests that suggests that the payroll report numbers that we're getting may be artificially high and will be revised down. You know that. We've also seen anecdotal data like the Beige Book. So we took all of those and we went into blackout and we thought about what to do, and we concluded that this was the right thing for the economy, for the people that we serve, and that's how we made our decision. So that's one question.
When was that?
What was the second and third?
When were the payrolls revised down?
Sorry, thank you.
And all the Republicans got mad that 800,000 jobs
were. How do we figure out in the months
were
ahead,
fake?
Is there another 25 or 50 coming in?
Was that 2 months ago by now?
Make that call. Thank you.
Sure. So, a couple things. A good place to start is the SEP. But let me start with what I said, which was that we're going to be making decisions meeting by meeting, based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, the balance of risks. If you look at the SEP, you'll see that it's a process of recalibrating our policy stance away from where we had it a year ago when inflation was high and unemployment low, to a place that's more appropriate given where we are now and where we expect to be. And that process will take place over time. There's nothing in the SEP that suggests the committee is in a rush to get this done. This process evolves over time. Of course, that's a projection. That's a baseline projection. We know, as I mentioned in my remarks, that the actual things that we do will depend on the way the economy evolves. We can go quicker if that's appropriate. We can go slower if that's appropriate. We can pause if that's appropriate.
Go quicker.
But that's what we were contemplating. I would point you to the SEP as just an assessment of where of what the committee is thinking today, what the individual members, rather, of the committee are thinking today,
canceled.
Assuming that their particular forecasts are realized.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Thank you. The projections show that the Fed officials expect the Fed funds rate to still be above their estimate of long-run neutral by the end of next year. So does that suggest you see rates as restrictive for that entire period? Does that threaten the weakening of the job market that you said you'd like to avoid? Or does it suggest that maybe people see the short-run neutral as a little bit higher? Thank you.
I think the way I would really characterize it is this. I think people write down their estimate, individuals do. I think every single person on the committee, if you ask them what's your level of certainty around that, and they would say there's a wide range where that could fall. So I think we don't know. There are model-based approaches and empirically based approaches that estimate what the neutral rate will be at any given time. But realistically, we know it by its works. So that leaves us in a place where we expect, in the base case, to be continuing to remove restriction, and we'll be looking at the way the economy reacts to that, and that'll be guiding us in our thinking about the question that we're asking at every meeting, which is our policy stance the appropriate one? We know, if you go back, we know that the policy stance we adopted in July of 2023 came at a time when unemployment was 3.5% and inflation was 4.2%. Today, unemployment is up to 4.2%. Inflation's down to a few tenths above 2. So we know that it is time to recalibrate our policy to something that is more appropriate given the progress on inflation and on employment moving to a more sustainable level. So the balance of risks are now even. And this is the beginning of that process. I mentioned the direction of which is toward a sense of neutral. And we'll move as fast or as slow as we think is appropriate in real time. But what you have is our individual accumulation of individual estimates of what that will be in the base case.
Howard.
Howard Schneider with Reuters. How close was this in terms of the decision? You do have the first dissent by a governor since 2005, I think. Was the weight clearly in favor of a 50, or was this a very close decision?
What did the dissenter say again?
Discussion. If you go back, I talked about this at Jackson Hole, but I didn't address the question of the size of the cut and left it open. And I think we left it open going into blackout. And so there was a lot of discussion back and forth. Good diversity of division. Excellent discussion today. I think there was also broad support for the decision that the committee voted on. So I would add, though, look at the SEP. All 19 of the participants wrote down multiple cuts this year. All 19. That's a big change from June, right? 7 of them wrote down 3 or more, 17 of the 19 wrote down 3 or more cuts, and 10 of the 19 wrote down 4 or more cuts. So, there is a dissent, and there's a range of views, but there's actually a lot of common ground as well.
Follow up to that, now that this is in the books, can you give us some guidance, as sort of follow up to Steve, on the pacing here? Would you expect this to be running every other meeting once we get into next year? We're
going to take it meeting by meeting. As I mentioned, there's no sense that the committee feels it's in a rush to do this. We made a good, strong start to this, and that's really, frankly, a sign of our confidence. Confidence that inflation is coming down toward 2% on a sustainable basis. That gives us the ability. We can, make a good, strong start, but. And I'm very pleased that we did. To me, the logic of this, both from an economic standpoint and also from a risk management standpoint, was clear. But I think we're going to go carefully, meeting by meeting, and make our decisions as we go.
Gina.
Hi, Chair Powell. Gina Smilik with the New York Times. Thanks for taking our questions. You and your colleagues in your economic projections today see the unemployment rate climbing to 4.4% and staying there. Obviously,
you've been wrong about that before.
When the unemployment rate climbs that much over a relatively short period of time, it doesn't typically just stop. It continues increasing. And so I wonder if you can walk us through why you see the labor market stabilizing, sort of what's the mechanism there, and what do you see as the risks?
So, again, the labor market is actually in solid condition, and our intention with our policy move today is to keep it there. You can say that about the whole economy. The U.S. economy is in good shape. It's growing at a solid pace.
He's frozen.
Inflation is coming down.
Oh.
The labor market is in a strong pace. We want to keep it there. That's what we're doing.
Sorry, Nick.
Wow, great answer.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, does today's action constitute a catch-up in action given recent substantial revisions to the employment data? Or is this larger than typical rate cut a function of the elevated nominal level of the policy rate such that an accelerated cadence could be expected to continue?
Okay.
The what?
Multiple questions in there, but so I would say
he asked that question
we're
like
behind. We think this is time.
like when you're trying to sound smart in like a fucking like Socratic seminar,
commitment not to get behind.
like in school.
So it's a strong move. Sorry, your other question was.
Well, is this about what happened in the employment data between this meeting and the last meeting, or is this about the level of the funds rate,
now he's speaking normally.
The level of the funds rate relative to what might be expected if you're trying to maintain equilibrium?
So I think it's about we come into this. With a policy position that was put in place, as you know, I mentioned in July of 2023, which was a time of high inflation and very low unemployment. We've been very patient about reducing the policy rate. We've waited. Other central banks around the world have cut, many of them several times. We've waited, and I think that patience has really paid dividends in the form of our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably down to 2%. So I think that is what enables us to take this strong
I wonder if Ben Shapiro was tweeting about this yet.
I do not think that anyone should look at this and
guarantee you he's going to say what he said earlier and what Sample said he's going to say.
You have to think about it in terms of the base case. Of course, what happens will happen. So in the base
slap
case,
in the face that
what
those
you
of us
see
suffering
is look
from
at the
continuing
S&P,
high
you see
DoorDash prices.
cuts moving along. The sense of this is we're recalibrating policy down over time to a more neutral level. And we're moving at the pace that we think is appropriate given developments in the economy in the base case. The economy can develop in a way that would cause us to go faster or slower, but that's what the base case says.
And if I could follow up on the balance sheet. In 2019, when you did the mid-cycle adjustment, you ceased the balance sheet runoff. With a larger cut today, should there be any signal inferred about how the committee would approach end state on the balance sheet?
He hasn't yet.
So in the current situation, reserves have really been stable. They haven't come down. So reserves are still abundant and expected to remain so for some time. As you know, the shrinkage in our balance sheet has really come out of the overnight RRP. So I think what that tells you is we're not thinking about stopping runoff because of this at all. We know that these two things can happen side by side. In a sense, they're both a form of normalization. And so for a time, you can have the balance sheet shrinking, but also be cutting rates.
Colby.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. Just following up on Gina's question on rising unemployment, is it your view that this is just a function of a normalizing labor market amid improved supply, or is there anything to suggest that something more concerning perhaps is taking place here, given that other metrics of labor demand have softened too? And I guess in direct follow-up to Gina is, why should we not expect a further deterioration in labor market conditions if policy is still restrictive?
So I think what we're seeing is clearly labor market conditions have cooled off by any measure, as I talked about in Jackson Hole. And but they're still at a level. The level of those conditions is actually pretty close to what I would call maximum employment. So you're close to mandate, maybe at mandate on that. So what's driving it? Clearly, payroll and job
employment is really high.
Moved down over the last few months, and this bears watching. By many other measures, the labor market has returned to or below 2019 levels, which was a very good, strong labor market. But this is more sort of 2018-17. So the labor market bears close watching, and we'll be giving it that. But ultimately, we believe, with an appropriate recalibration of our policy, that we can continue to see the economy growing, and that will support the labor market. In the meantime, if you look at the growth in economic activity data, the retail sales data that we just got, second quarter GDP, all of this indicates an economy that is still growing at a solid pace. So that should also support the labor market over time. So, but again, it bears watching, and we're watching.
And just on the point about
what has NGDP been at year over year?
Layoffs. If that were to happen, wouldn't the committee already be too late in terms of avoiding a recession?
So that's our plan, of course, has been to begin
real
to
GDP. I want
recalibrate.
NGDP.
As you know, we're not seeing rising claims. We're not seeing rising layoffs. We're not seeing that, and we're not hearing that from companies that that's something that's getting ready to happen. So we're not waiting for that, because there is thinking that the time to support the labor market is when it's strong, and not when you begin to see the layoffs. There's some lore on that. So that's the situation we're in. We have, in fact, begun the cutting cycle now, and we'll 6%. Be watching, and that'll be one of the factors that we consider. Of course, we're going to look at the totality of the data as we make these decisions meeting by meeting.
Oh, that's changing.
Michael McKee with Bloomberg TV and Radio. To follow up on that, what would constitute for you and the committee a deterioration in the labor market? You're pricing in basically by the end of next year 200 basis points of cuts just to maintain a higher unemployment rate. Would you be moving to a more preemptive monetary policy style rather than, as you did with inflation, waiting until the data gave you a signal?
No, we're going to be watching all of the data, right? So if, as I mentioned in my remarks, if the labor market were to slow unexpectedly, then we have the ability to react to that. The Fed is data dependent, by cutting faster. We're also going to be looking at our other mandate, though. We have greater confidence now that inflation is moving down to 2%, but at the same time, our plan is that we will be at 2%, over time. So. And policy, we think, is still restrictive, so that should still be happening.
I'm just curious as to how sensitive you'll be to the labor market, since you forecast we are going to see higher unemployment, and it is going to take a significant amount of monetary easing to just maintain it.
So, what I would say is we don't think we need to see further loosening in labor market conditions to get inflation down to 2%. But we have a dual mandate, and I think you can take this whole action as
how many times has he just said
we've been trying to achieve?
We have a dual mandate. We'll keep looking at employment and inflation figures
without the kind of painful
that is my job.
Increase in unemployment that has come sometimes with disinflation. That's what we're trying to do, and I think you can take today's action as a sign of our strong commitment to achieve that goal.
Rachel. Hi, Chair Powell. Rachel Siegel from the Washington Post. Thanks for taking our questions. You're describing this view that you don't think you're behind when it comes to the job market. Can you walk us through the specific data points that you found to be most helpful in the discussions at this meeting? You've mentioned a couple, but would you be able to walk us through what that dashboard told you as far as what you know about the job market now?
Sure. So we'll start with unemployment, which is the single most important one probably. You're at 4.2%. That's, I know that's higher than we were used to seeing numbers in the mid and even below mid threes last year. But if you look back over the sweep of the years, that's a very healthy unemployment rate. And anything in the low fours is a good labor market. So that's one thing. Participation is at high
Don't you
levels.
know? Just because everyone has two jobs,
we're adjusted for demographics, for aging. Participation's at pretty high levels. That's a good thing. Wages are still a bit above what would be their wage increases, rather, are still just a bit above where they would be over the very longer term to be consistent with 2% inflation, but they're very much coming down to what that sustainable level is, so we feel good about that. Vacancies over, per unemployed is back to what is still a very strong level.
What's up, Localist Party? Hello.
That number
Happy
reached
Friday
2 to 1, 2
well.
vacancies for every unemployed person.
Wait, it's not Friday, isn't it?
It's
Thursday
now below,
or Wednesday?
around,
yeah.
around one, but that's still,
Why did I believe
a very
you?
good number, I would say. Quits have come back down to normal levels. I mean, I could go on and on. There are many employment.
The days don't matter to me because
they say
all I
this
do
is
is
still
stream.
a solid labor market. The question isn't the level. The question is that there has been change, particularly over the last few months. And so what we say is, as the risks, the upside risks to inflation have really come down, the downside risks to employment have increased. And because we have been patient and and held our fire on cutting while inflation has come down, I think we're now in a very good position to manage the risks to both of our goals.
And what do you expect to learn between now and November that will help inform the scale of the cut at the next meeting?
More data, the usual. Don't look for anything else. We'll see another labor report. We'll see another jobs report. I think we get a second jobs report on the day of the meeting, I think. Or no, on the Friday before the meeting. And inflation data. We'll get all this data. We'll be watching. It's always a question of look at the incoming data and ask what are the implications of that data for the evolving outlook and the balance of risks, and then go through our process and think what's the right thing to do.
He has not said data dependent yet. He's not said
foster the achievement of our goals over time. So that's what it is, and that's what we'll be doing.
Thanks. Hi, Chair Powell. Neil Irwin with Axios. We've only been running a little above 100,000 jobs a month on payrolls the last 3 months. Do you view that level of job creation as worrying or alarming, or would you be content if we were to kind of stick at that level? And relatedly, one of the welcome trends of the last couple of years has been
he already said he
steam
thinks
coming
it's
out
strong.
through
He wants to
job
keep it that way.
falling rather than job losses.
Why are you watching this? It's interesting. It's cool. It's the POW party. What do you mean? Why am I watching this?
Have to come through job losses.
So on the job
this is a
creation,
big deal.
It depends on
the POW party.
Depends on the inflows.
They're cutting rates
So
for the first time in 14
millions
months.
of people come into the labor force, and you're creating 100,000 jobs, you're going to see unemployment go up. So it really depends on what's the trend underlying the volatility of people coming into the country. We understand there's been quite an influx across the borders, and that has actually been one of the things that's allowed unemployment rate to rise. And the other thing is just the slower hiring rate, which is something we also watch carefully. So it does depend on what's happening on the supply side. And on the beverage curve question, yes. So we all felt on the committee, not all, but I think everyone on the committee felt that
why would you watch part of
they could fall a long way
would you
before
watch?
You hit the part of the curve
I don't know
where
who
job
that guy
openings
is.
Turned into higher unemployment.
Is he a
job
localist?
loss.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, I mean, I think we are. It's hard to know that you can't know these things with great precision, but certainly it appears that we're very close to that point, if not at it, so that further declines in job openings will translate more directly into unemployment. But it's been a great ride down. I mean, we've seen a lot of tightness come out of the labor market in that form without it resulting in lower employment.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Edward Lawrence, Fox Business. So we've heard some speculation that you may be going with the federal funds rate to 3.5%, maybe under 4%. And there's basically an entire generation that has experienced zero or near zero federal funds rate. Now, some think we're heading in that direction again. What's the likelihood that cheap money is now the norm?
I think he said.
So this is a question. You mean after we get through all of
rate's
this?
probably going to be higher.
It's just a great question that we can only speculate about. Intuitively, many people anyway would say we're probably not going back to that era where there were trillions of dollars of sovereign bonds trading at negative rates, long-term bonds trading at negative rates. And it looked like the neutral rate might even be negative. So people were issuing debt at negative rates. It seems that's so far away now. My own sense is that we're not going back to that. But honestly, we're going to find out. But it feels to me and that the neutral rate is probably significantly higher than it was back then. How high is it? I just don't think we know. We only know it by its works.
And one more. How do you respond to the criticism that will likely come that a deeper rate cut now before the election has some political motivations?
Yeah, so this is my fourth presidential election at the Fed, and it's always the same. We're always going into
do you support
this
ending the
meeting
Fed?
in particular
No.
and asking what's the right thing to do for the people we serve, and we do that, and we make a decision as a group, and then we announce it, and that's always what it is. It's never about anything else. Nothing else is discussed.
I need to maybe sample have some
I would also
pro
point out that
central
the
bank
things
stuff
we
that I
do
can read.
really affect
That'd be
economic
interesting to
conditions
read.
for the most part with a lag. So nonetheless, this is what we do. Our job is to support the economy on behalf of the American people. And if we get it right, this will benefit the American people significantly. So this really concentrates the mind. And, it's something we all take very, very seriously. We don't put up any other filters. I think if you start doing that, I don't know where you stop. And so we just don't do that.
Jolene. Thank you, Chair Powell. I'm Jolene Kent with CBS News. My first question is, very simply, what message are you trying to send American consumers, the American
paste
people,
a Wikipedia article?
With this unusually large rate cut?
I would just say that the U.S. economy is in a good place, and our decision today is designed to keep it there. More specifically, the economy is growing at a solid pace. Inflation is coming down closer to our 2% objective over time. And the labor market is still in solid shape. So our intention is really to maintain the strength that we currently see in the U.S. economy. And we'll do that by returning rates from their high level, which has really been the purpose of which has been to get inflation under control. We're going to move those down over time to a more normal level over time.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Listening to you talk about inflation moving meaningfully down to 2%, is the Federal Reserve effectively declaring a decisive victory over inflation and rising prices?
No.
Well, we're going to continue looking at the data.
So inflation, what we say is we want inflation, the goal is to have inflation move down to 2% on a sustainable basis. And, we're not really, we're close, but we're not really at 2%. And I think we're going to want to see
it's an absolutely horrible idea. That's like one of his worst policy proposals.
But we're certainly not doing. We're not.
He didn't mention the data again for a fifth time.
I have to say, though, we're encouraged by the progress that we have made.
Hi, Katerina Saraiva with Bloomberg News. I just would love to know kind of how the committee is thinking about the persistence we've seen in housing inflation. Do you think you can return to 2% with housing inflation where it is?
Who gives a fuck?
Housing inflation
You're the Fed.
Is the one piece that is kind of dragging a bit, if I can say.
Yes, correct, accurate.
We know that market rents are doing what we would want them to do, which is to be moving up at relatively low levels. But they're not rolling over. The leases that are rolling over are not.
But you're the Fed. You can't do anything about land use. You're the fucking Fed.
It's been
not
slower than we
not your issue to
expected.
solve.
We now understand.
Every other European country, they'll use their harmonized data, which doesn't include housing inflation.
And as long as market rents remain, relatively low inflation over time, that will show up. Just the time it's taking now, several years rather than just one or two cycles of annual lease renewals. So I think we understand that now, but I don't think the outcome is in doubt. Again, as long as market rents remain under control, the outcome is not in doubt. So I would say it's the rest of the portfolio, or of the elements that go into core PCE inflation have behaved pretty well. They all have some volatility. We will get down to 2% inflation, I believe, and I believe that ultimately we'll get what we need to get out of the housing services piece too.
Some of your colleagues have expressed concern that with starting to cut rates, you could reignite demand in housing and see prices go up even more. What's the likelihood of that, and how would you react to that?
So the housing market, it's hard to game that out. The housing market is in part frozen because of lock-in with low rates. People don't want to sell their home, so because they have a very low mortgage, it'd be quite expensive to refinance. As rates come down, people will start to move more, and that's probably beginning to happen already. But remember, when that happens, you've got a seller, but you've also got a new buyer in many cases. So it's not obvious how much additional demand that would make. I mean, the real issue with housing is that we have had and are on track to continue to have not enough housing. And so it's going to be
Thank you,
challenging. It's
Jerome
hard to
Powell. We have
find
give me Jerome Powell as
zone
well.
lots that are in
Now the
places
Fed
where
starts
people
rates,
wanna
I'm sure
live.
everyone will start borrowing
It's
in the
all
economy.
of the
will,
aspects of
big
housing
boom.
are
so true. Go
more
syndicate.
difficult.
I mean, you.
And,
you're going to
you
do
know,
your
where are we
MMT
gonna get
shit,
the supply?
but
And this
okay,
is not something that the Fed can.
we're having a
can
normal
really fix. But I think as
non-MMT
we
moment right
normalize
now.
rates,
You can
you'll
come
see
with
the
your
housing
MMT
market
critiques
normalize. And,
afterwards.
I mean, ultimately, by getting inflation broadly down and getting those rates normalized and getting the housing cycle normalized, that's the best thing we can do for householders. And then the supply question will have to be dealt
Fed days are
with
not
by the
MMT,
market
exactly.
and also by government.
Victoria.
Hi, Victoria with
Fed days
Politico.
are for trolling
Just following
libertarians.
up on some of the
True.
labor market talk earlier, you know, monetary policy operates with long and variable lags, and I'm wondering how much you see being able to keep the unemployment rate from raising too much.
Oh my God.
Comes
He's
from
answered
the
this question
fact that
3
you're
times.
starting to act now, and that's going to give people more room to run versus just the labor market is strong. And then also, if I could, following up on Nick's question. Do you see today's 50 basis point move as partially a response to the fact that you didn't cut in July, and that sort of gets you to the same place?
Porter must know. She said
So
a
you're
lot
right about lags, but
a
I
lot.
would-
She said
I
in
would just
variable
point to the
lags.
overall
Well,
economy.
there is
You have an
one
economy that is
reporter
growing at a
for the
solid
Wall Street
pace.
Journal that
If you look at
literally,
forecasters or talk to
literally
companies,
sounded like
they'll
a
say
kid
that they
trying to
think
sound smart in like a
2025
Socratic
should be a good
seminar
year too.
in
So,
school, and like Jerome Powell was
there's no
really
sense-
confused
the
because
US
the way he
economy
phrased the question was so
basically
poor.
fine.
And
If
he
you
had to
talk
restate it
market
in like normal
participants,
English.
I mean,
It was really
you know,
funny.
business people who are actually out there doing business. So I think, you know, I think our
I
move
forget
is
exactly what
timely.
he said. It was too
I
convoluted.
do, and
but-
as I said, you can see our 50 basis point move as a commitment to make sure that we don't fall behind. So you're really asking about your second question. You're asking about July, and I guess if you ask, you know, if we'd gotten the July report before the meeting, would we have cut? We might well have. We didn't make that decision, but you know, we might well have. I think that's not, you know, that doesn't really answer the question that we ask ourselves, which is let's look, you know, when at this meeting we're looking back to the July employment report, the August employment report, the 2 CPI reports, one of which came, of course, during blackout, and all of the other things that I mentioned. We're looking at all of those things, and we're asking ourselves, what's the policy stance we need to move to?
I need a fucking
It's clear
desk
that
to
we
be delivered,
clearly,
but it won't get here. It said it was supposed to be
literally,
by 2
everyone
p.m.,
on the
but it
committee
won't.
agreed
It isn't.
that it's time to move. It's just how fast do you go, and what do you think about the path forward? So this decision we made today had broad support on the committee, and I've discussed the path ahead.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Elizabeth Schulze with ABC News. Mortgage rates have already been dropping in anticipation of this announcement. How much more should borrowers expect those rates to drop over the next year?
Jerome Powell is such an expert on economics.
hard
I
for
can
me
tell
to
by the
say.
way
That's-
I
from
can
our
tell by his law
standpoint,
school degree in
I
Korean
can't really
finance.
speak to
Wait, does
mortgage
he
rates. I
actually?
will say,
I didn't know he had a law degree.
You know, that'll depend on how the economy evolves. Our intention, though, is we think that our policy was appropriately restrictive. We think that it's time to begin the process of recalibrating it to a level that's more neutral rather than restrictive. We expect that process to take some time, as you can see in the projections that we released today.
He received a Bachelor of Arts in
if
Political
things work
Science
out
as
according
well?
to that
Why?
forecast, other rates in the economy will come down as well. However, the rate at which those things happen will really depend on how the economy performs. We can't look a year ahead and know what the economy is going to be doing.
What's your message to households who are frustrated?
Why the fuck did Obama
home
appoint this
prices have still
motherfucker?
stayed so high as rates have been high? What do you say to those households?
Well, what I can say to the public is that we had a burst of inflation. Many other countries
Don't care.
around the world had
Yeah, the
a
courage to cut
similar
rates.
burst of
Man of the
inflation.
year.
And when
Give
that
him Time
happens,
Person of the Year right
part
now.
of the answer is that we raise interest rates in order to cool the economy off, in order to reduce inflationary pressure.
Oh, close your ear. Close your ears, Gopin.
It's
Okay.
not something that people experience as pleasant.
Close your ear. Plug your
but
ears.
At the end, what you get is low inflation restored, price stability restored. And a good definition of price stability is that people in their daily decisions, they're not thinking about inflation anymore. That's where everyone wants to be, is back to what's inflation. We just keep it low, keep it stable. We're restoring that. So what we're going through now really it restores, it will benefit people over a long period of time. Price stability benefits everybody over a long period of time just by virtue of the fact that they don't have to deal with inflation. So that's what's been going on, and I think we've made real progress.
Good definition.
We don't tell people how to think about the economy, of course, and of course people are experiencing high prices as opposed to high inflation, and we understand that's painful.
Greg.
Hi, Chair Powell. Greg Robb from MarketWatch.com. I was wondering if you could go through, you said just at the beginning that coming into the blackout, there was like an open thought of 25 or 50. The Fed could move either 25 or 50. I would sort of argue that when we had those two last speeches by Governor Waller and New York Fed President John Williams, that they were sort of saying that maybe a gradual approach was going to win the day. I mean, I'd sort of want to ask a 7-part question about this, but I mean, would you have cut rates by 50 basis points if the market
Very smart people like Jay Powell running the show, so you can do exactly what the market expects every time.
Last Wednesday,
all his decisions are priced in, obviously.
There's a really small probability of a 50-point cut. Does that play in your consideration at all? Just talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
We're always going to try to do what we think is the right thing for the economy at that time.
What for real?
What we did today.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Simon Rabinovich with The Economist. You've mentioned how closely you're watching the labor market, but you also noted that payroll numbers have been a little bit less reliable lately because of the big downward revisions. Does that put your focus overwhelmingly on the unemployment rate? And given the SEP projection of 4.4 basically being the peak in the cycle, would going above that be the kind of thing that would trigger another 50 basis point cut?
So we will continue to look at that broad array of labor market data, including the payroll numbers. We're not discarding those. I mean, we'll certainly look at those, but we will mentally tend to adjust them based on the QCEW adjustment, which you referred to. There isn't a bright line. It will be, the unemployment rate's very important, of course, but there isn't a single statistic or a single bright line over which that might move that would dictate one thing or another. We'll look at each meeting, we'll look at all the data on inflation, economic activity, and the labor market, and we'll make decisions about is our policy stance where it needs to be.
What? That's your job?
To foster
That's
over
crazy.
The medium term.
You had to answer this 5 times.
Yeah, so I can't say.
And every time they answer, it's just like, yes, it is my job to look at the data and make a decision.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Matt Egan from CNN. I know that you discussed earlier how the Fed does whatever the right thing is and nothing else factors in. But, in general, can you talk about whether or not you believe a sitting U.S. president should have a say in Fed decisions on interest rates? Because that's something that former President Trump,
comment on
this. Has previously suggested. And I know the Fed is designed to be independent, but why? Can you tell the public why you view that so important?
This is a good question.
Sure. So
I hope he answers it.
Countries that are democracies around the world, countries that are sort of like the United States, all have what are called independent central banks. And the reason is that people have found over time that insulating the central bank from direct control by political authorities avoids making monetary policy in a way that favors maybe people who are in office as opposed to people who are not in office. So that's the idea. Is that and I think the data are clear that countries that have
pro-inflationary bias,
they get lower inflation, and so we're not. We do our work to serve all Americans. We're not serving any politician.
Because all the trumpets hate inflation so much.
Figure, any cause,
but
any issue, nothing. It's just
the independent central bank ensures lower inflation because politicians usually have a pro-inflation bias.
Banks are set up to. It's a good institutional arrangement, which has been good for the public, and I hope and strongly believe that it will continue.
Kyle Campbell for American Banker. Thanks for taking the questions, Chair Powell. A couple regulatory developments in the past week that I want to ask you about. First, last week, Vice Chair for Supervision, Michael Barr, outlined his views for the changes to the Basel III Endgame. I'm wondering if you are in alignment with him on what those changes should be, if those have support on the board in a broad way that you're looking for, and if you think the other agencies are also fully on board with that approach. And then yesterday, other banking regulators.
You know what? Hold the second question.
Okay, sure.
Let me we'll give you the second question. So, the answer to your question is that yes, those changes were negotiated between the agencies with my support and with my involvement, with the idea that we were going to repropose the changes that Vice Chair Barr talked about, and then take comment on them. So yes, that is, that's happening with my support.
Needs to get here.
Is there a date for that?
That's not a final proposal, though. You understand? We're putting them out for comment. We're going to take comment and make appropriate changes. We don't have a calendar date for that. And as for the other agencies, the idea is that we're all moving together. We're not moving separately. So that I don't know exactly where that is, but the idea is that we will move as a group to put this again out for comment, and then it'll come. The comments will come back 60 days later, and we'll dive into them, and we'll try to bring this to a conclusion sometime in the first half of next year.
Right. And then yesterday there were merger reform finalizations from the other bank regulators. What does the Fed have to do to align itself on merger?
I would bounce that question to Vice Chair Barr. It's a good question, but I don't have that today. Thanks.
Jennifer for the last question.
Okay, last question.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. You said earlier that the decision today reflects with appropriate recalibration strength in the labor market that can be maintained in the context of moderate growth. Even though the policy statement says you view the risks to inflation and job growth as roughly balanced. Given what you've said, though, today, I'm curious, are you more worried about the job market and growth than inflation? Are they not roughly balanced?
You said this a million times. The upside risk to inflation have increased and the downside risk.
For a long time,
the unemployment
having we had a historically tight labor market.
I think I said it backwards.
There was a severe labor shortage, so very hot labor market, and we had inflation way above target. So, that said to us, concentrate on inflation, and we did for a while, and we kept at that. That the stance that we put in place 14 months ago was a stance that was focused on bringing down inflation. Part of bringing down inflation, though, is cooling off the economy and a little bit cooling off the labor market. You now have a cooler labor market in part because of our activities. So what that tells you is it's time to change our stance. So we did that. The sense of the change in the stance is that we're recalibrating our policy over time to a stance that will be more neutral. And today I think we made a good, strong start on that. I think it was the right decision, and I think it should send a signal that that we're committed to coming up with a good outcome here.
Is the economy more vulnerable to a shock now that could tip it into recession?
I don't think so. I don't. As I look. Well, let me look at it this way. I don't see anything in the economy right now that suggests that the likelihood of a downturn is elevated. Okay, I don't see that. You see growth at a solid rate. You see inflation coming down, and you see a labor market that's still at very solid levels. So I don't really see that. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Damn,
that wraps
crazy.
up a news conference that probably should have wrapped up.
Yeah, upside inflation and risk have diminished.
15 minutes ago, live from New York City this afternoon. Good afternoon. For our audience worldwide, welcome to the program, a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance on a Federal Reserve decision. The decision as follows, a 50 basis point cut with a sprinkle of dissent. Your equity market on the S&P 500 still just about firmer, but rolling over in that news conference. We're now firmer by just 1/4%. On the Russell, still elevated up by more than 1 full percentage point. Straight out of the gate in that news
I want to
conference.
find the video of Ben Shapiro saying
Policy recalibration, something he said multiple times.
single greatest Mossad operation of all time.
Over time. Take a listen to what the chairman
of him
had to
talking
say
about
on the path
the
forward.
rate cuts.
I do not think that anyone should look
When
at
they
this
were-
and say, "Oh, this is the new pace."
When he
you
announced
have
he was
to think
considering
about it
cutting
in terms
rates.
of the base case. Of course, what happens will happen. So
How
in the
Trump can
base
destroy
case,
comma in the
what
debate.
you see is look at the SEP. You see cuts moving along. The sense of this is we're recalibrating policy
Might have
down
been
over
this.
time to a more neutral level, and we're moving at the pace that we think is appropriate.
Recalibration on repeat. Lisa, looking forward, meeting by meeting, this is not the new pace. That's something he put some weight on, some emphasis in that news conference.
And if you were basically judging his news conference based on the stock reaction, there was a little wobble after that statement, and even more of a wobble after he really addressed the idea of a neutral rate. He called it a sense of neutral, whatever that may be, and he said that my own sense is we're not going back to that Nehru time or that negative rate, very low rate time. Neutral rate is probably much higher. You saw a reaction there, but then people shook it off and said, hey, he's got our back.
I look, John, I strapped a Fibonacci across this, and from where we were to the midpoint of the pandemic low is 2 7/8. He is correct. It's just a nudge in the distance to travel just to get back to the midpoint, call it normal. It's a lot longer than the jawboning in the press conference that we just saw.
We're lucky to have Mohammed alongside us. He won't say mission accomplished. He refused to say it in this news conference, but we've got to ask, isn't it implied? Listen to this. The labour market conditions are pretty close to maximum employment. Retail sales, GDP show the economy is growing at a solid pace. We're not seeing rising layoffs or hearing it from companies. It's time to support the labour market when it's strong. That's what we're trying to do. Is that mission accomplished? Isn't it implied?
Yeah, I mean, Jason Furman put it as well as anybody can when he said, if you look at the projection and now
That is kinda
listen
true,
to
I
the
didn't consider
statement,
that, but-
it is, and I'm quoting him, just about the closest thing to mission accomplished banner that you can imagine them unfurling. So I think it is. The hard thing for
Lion Street chief economist Oxford is on the camp that the Fed is making up for not having started to cut rates in July. The Fed also doesn't like to admit policy errors, but some of the decision for a larger cut in September is likely to get caught up as the central bank found itself behind the curve by one meeting. He wrote a note. Therefore, the September decision. Okay. Was this mentioned? There was one dissent. Yeah, he preferred just a quarter cut. Or she, Michelle. Which was the first dissent in a while. I don't actually know. I don't know. I know they have to vote and agree. Just Jerome Powell being the chair, does he get more of a say, or does he get a veto power or something? Wild. That's a wrap. How it's finished. We'll be right back with a few big takeaways. All right. I was hoping that the desk I ordered would get here because it was supposed to be delivered by 2 p.m. And I was like, oh, perfect. I'll stream the Fed conference, and then the desk will get here. I'll go pick up the desk, and I'll assemble it, set up everything on my new desk, and then I can stream the real stream. But it's not delivered yet, and the post office closes at 4:30, so they have less than an hour to deliver it, so I can get there in time to pick it up before they close. It's messing up my whole plan. All right, but I'll stream again like a real stream later, at like 5 p.m. or something. So watch out for that. I have to fucking edit shit, and I gotta actually, I don't know if I have anything to edit. I don't know. I mean, I got it up and immediately had to go to lunch with my grandparents, and then came right back home and streamed. So I have to like shower and like get ready and shit. Okay, so see you guys in like a few hours. I guess I can raid the boss with 2 viewers. No, I can't because he has his fucking raids turned off or whatever. That's right. Well, I guess there's not really many people I can raid then. I guess Kid Not Kid, but he's just sleeping. I guess Skade. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in like if I can 2 hours. Alright, see ya. Thanks. Love streaming. Hope you guys watch me. Yeah. With my new desk.